In the middle of a snowstorm, a soldier returns home after years of fighting. His uniform worn, his loyal German shepherd by his side. But instead of open arms, he is greeted by a suitcase, divorce papers, and a luxury car waiting for his wife. His two little girls in tattered pink dresses run to him, calling Daddy, while their mother walks away without a glance. They say he has nothing left. But on that cold night, Silas discovers the war that will define his life. The war to protect his girls, only love, loyalty, and a dog that will never leave his side. The wind carried snow like shattered glass through the streets of Duluth, Minnesota. Street lamps flickered dimly under their frosted hoods, casting halos that seemed too fragile to survive the night. The bus, old and lumbering, wheezed to a stop at the end of a road where houses crouched under white blankets of winter. From its iron belly stepped a man who seemed stitched together by scars and silence. His name was Silas Whitaker, once a soldier of the United States Army, now a father returning after years away. The uniform he wore was threadbare at the seams, the patches dulled to gray. His shoulders were wide but slumped, carrying the kind of weight that no metals could relieve. In his left hand was a backpack, frayed from foreign dust and rain. In his right was a small teddy bear in a paratrooper's cap, an old promise kept across oceans and wars. Beside him padded a tall German shepherd, its coat black and tan, its amber eyes alive with restless fire. The dog's name was Valor, a name Silas had whispered on desert nights when comrades fell, and silence pressed too heavily. Valor was more than a pet. He was Silas's shadow, a creature of loyalty born from rescue. Years earlier, Silas had pulled the trembling pup from the ruins of a shelled farmhouse overseas. The bond formed that day grew into something that followed him through barracks, foxholes, and sleepless nights. Now, in the heart of a Minnesota winter, Valor shook the snow from his fur and pressed close to his master, as if sensing the storm ahead was not in the sky, but waiting behind closed doors. The dirt road leading home stretched empty and still, bordered by skeletal trees bending under ice. Silas walked slowly, his boots crunching in rhythm, Valor's paw prints forming a second trail alongside. In his chest, hope beat unevenly. He imagined warm embraces, two little girls squealing, a woman's arms around his neck. But when the wooden house emerged from the mist-peeling paint, sagging roofline, shutters bolted tight, his heart stuttered. The yard lay unkempt, weeds frozen into brittle skeletons. The front porch creaked when he stepped onto it. He raised his hand, still clutching the teddy bear, and knocked on the door. It opened with a hesitant groan. Marina Caldwell, his wife, stood there. She was 35, beautiful in a way sculpted by order rather than warmth. A white wool dress draped her frame, her hair tied neatly into a bun, strands catching the lamplight. Her face, powdered lightly, showed no smile, no shock, only cool composure. Years of loneliness had hardened her gaze. She had once been a nurse at the county clinic, gentle with patients, humming while she worked, but financial strain and Silas's long deployments had carved away that softness. Loneliness had bred bitterness, and bitterness had found comfort in another man's wealth. She bent down, picked up a manila folder from the table, and held it out. "You should read this." Her voice was calm, steady, as though she were prescribing medicine. Silas, frozen at the threshold, whispered, "I'm home." The words trembled in the air, swallowed by the winter cold. Marina did not answer. The papers in her hand spoke louder. Divorce finalized, signatures crisp and dry. Behind her in the hallway, a wheeled suitcase leaned against the wall, packed neatly as if waiting for a train. Valor growled low, the sound vibrating in his throat. His tail did not wag. He shifted closer to Silas, eyes flicking from Marina to the shadow of movement at the gate. Outside the fence, headlights glowed. An SUV, black, polished, and smug in its silence, idled with exhaust curling like a ghost. In the driver's seat sat Sterling Voss, a man whose wealth had been built from shipping contracts and whose reputation trailed whispers of arrogance. His white shirt gleamed against the leather interior, a gold watch catching every flicker of light. He tapped the steering wheel casually, eyes scanning Silas with the detached curiosity one might have for a broken tool. To him, war heroes were relics. Money was the only uniform worth saluting. Silas's hand went slack. The paper slipped to the porch and scattered in the snow. Before he could speak, a sudden cry pierced the silence. "Daddy!" Two small figures burst through the doorway. Ellie Mae and Lila Rose, the twin daughters he had left behind at only 3 years old, now stood before him at 7. They wore faded pink dresses layered with wool sweaters patched at the elbows, their blonde hair tangled into messy braids, cheeks flushed from the chill. Ellie clutched a blanket worn thin, its edges chewed. Lila held a wooden doll missing one arm. They were fragile yet resilient, their eyes wide with hunger for love. They ran into his arms. Silas knelt, dropping the teddy bear onto the snow as he embraced them. Ellie pressed her face into his chest, inhaling the scent of travel, dust, and something that reminded her of safety. Lila whispered, "We missed you, Daddy," as tears streaked her cheeks. Silas could not answer. His throat burned. He pulled them closer, his body shielding them from the biting wind. Valor circled the trio, standing guard, his nose nudging the children gently, his stance protective. Marina's eyes flickered. For a heartbeat, some buried emotion surfaced, but she pushed it down. With steady steps, she descended the porch, suitcase trailing behind. Valor tensed, but Silas whispered his name, and the dog stilled, though his gaze never left the woman. Sterling rolled down the window. "You should get used to this," he said coolly, voice slicing through the cold. "People like me are always the destination. Soldiers are too naive." Marina climbed into the SUV without looking back. The engine growled and the car glided down the icy road, tail lights glowing like embers fading into dark. Silas sank onto the wooden steps, still holding his daughters. The wind swept across the porch, carrying the dry scent of frozen wildflowers. He could accept the loss of Marina's love, but the thought that she had abandoned her children for wealth hollowed him. He looked down at the twins, at the fragile trust in their eyes, and swore silently. Whatever war remained, it was his to fight. Valor sat beside him, body pressed against his leg, eyes lifted as if to say, "We will hold the line together." Across the road, hidden by drifting snow, Hattie Bloom, the widowed neighbor, watched from her porch. Her shawl pulled tight, her face weathered by grief, she understood the weight of silence. She had lost her husband to war, her son to a car accident. She carried soup in a thermos, but chose not to approach yet. Some moments were sacred. Instead, she whispered into the cold, "Stay strong, soldier," and turned back inside. Not far behind, Nora pedaled slowly, her bicycle tires carving shallow lines in the snow. She had lingered too long watching the scene, her heart thudding with the instinct of a storyteller. Without planning, she raised her phone and captured the image. A soldier in uniform kneeling on a porch, arms wrapped around two little girls in pink, while a German shepherd stood like a sentinel. She tucked the phone away, unaware that this frozen image would soon ripple across the state and beyond. As night descended, the house stood silent except for the soft murmur of children and the steady breath of a dog keeping watch. Silas had returned to no warm welcome, only loss and cold air. Yet within the embrace of his daughters, beneath the watchful gaze of Valor, he felt the flicker of a fire no storm could extinguish. It was not triumph, it was resolve. And in war, resolve was often all that kept a man alive. Snow pressed against the windows of the Whitaker house as night fell across Duluth. Inside, the small fire in the iron stove flickered weakly. On the wooden table sat bread charred along one side, the air thick with the smell of burnt crust. Silas Whitaker sliced it anyway, his hands rough from years of service. Across from him, his daughters Ellie Mae and Lila Rose sat in patched sweaters over their faded pink dresses. Ellie wrinkled her nose at the blackened bread, while Lila dipped hers in thin corn porridge. On the floor, Valor, the tall German shepherd, thumped his tail softly. He nosed a fallen pencil back toward the table, earning a ripple of giggles. Silas, tired from a day of labor, let himself breathe for a moment. The dog's presence stitched calm into the frayed fabric of their lives. By day, Silas worked at Gabe Rourke's garage changing oil, lifting engines, scraping his knuckles against cold metal. Gabe, now 40, burly with a red beard, had known Silas since high school and offered him shifts out of loyalty more than profit. At night, Silas took watch duty at the warehouse, earning just enough for firewood and medicine. Exhaustion clung to him like a second uniform, but he never complained. He only whispered to Valor by the stove, "We'll make it through this winter." Meanwhile, Nora Whitcomb, a 23-year-old journalism student with unruly curls and stubborn ideals, scrolled through her camera in her apartment above a laundromat. Her parents had been protesters, and their spirit lived in her. When her eyes fell on the photo she had taken, Silas kneeling in the snow, twins wrapped around him, Valor guarding it, seemed to pulse with meaning. Without hesitation, she uploaded it with the caption, "A father, a soldier, a dog who keeps the fire of winter burning." By dawn, the image was everywhere. Blogs reposted it, veterans groups commented, and soon a local newspaper titled him the Quiet North Star. Strangers wrote blessings, some condemned Marina for leaving, others wept over the silent loyalty in Valor's eyes. Far away in a gleaming apartment, Marina Caldwell saw the photo on a tablet. Her fingers shook as the image replayed the family she had abandoned. Sterling Voss, her wealthy companion, barely looked up. "It's just a story," he muttered. But Marina could not turn away. In Duluth, neighbors began stopping by the Whitaker fence. Children pressed mittened hands to call Valor's name. Adults offered spare firewood or jars of jam. Valor accepted pats solemnly, sometimes dropping a stick as though inviting them to share his quiet duty. He became a bridge, softening the silence around the house. One morning, a letter arrived from the North Star Veterans Alliance. They offered to repair the roof, fund the twins' schooling, and help Silas into steady work. Silas read it carefully, then folded it. "I don't need much," he murmured. "Just a roof that doesn't leak, so my girls don't wake up cold." Valor, sitting close, watched with steady eyes as if to agree. Evenings brought small joys. Ellie braided Valor's tail clumsily, while Lila leaned against his side to draw crooked houses on scrap paper. When Silas trudged home through the snow, weary from grease and cold, he often found Valor waiting with the girls at the corner. Together they walked back, their shadows stretching across the frost, the dog prancing proudly as if he had guarded the world in their absence. The bread still burned, the porridge remained thin, and Silas's hands never stopped aching. Yet the air inside their house no longer smelled only of struggle. It carried the faint fragrance of resilience, of family refusing to vanish. What Silas could not yet see was how that single photograph, one moment of snow, daughters and a dog, would soon pull the quiet of their lives into the roar of the world beyond. The storm arrived without mercy. Snow slammed against the roof like handfuls of gravel, and wind howled through every crack of the Whitaker house. Inside, Silas bent over his daughter's small bed. Ellie Mae, cheeks flushed scarlet, trembled under thin blankets. Beads of sweat clung to her temples. Her breathing was shallow, strained. The old medicine bottle in the cabinet was empty. Silas tried the phone, but the line was dead, drowned by the storm. 7-year-old Lila Rose sat beside her twin, clutching a faded paratrooper teddy bear, tears welling as she whispered, "It's okay, Ellie. Daddy will fix it." Her words quivered with fear, but carried a child's fragile faith. Silas wrapped his army scarf around his neck, pulled on his threadbare coat, and dragged out an old bicycle from the shed. Its tires had been patched countless times, brakes unreliable, but it was all he had. He lined a wooden cart to the back with blankets. Carefully, he lifted Ellie into it, wrapping her in his military jacket. Lila climbed in beside her sister, holding the teddy tight. Valor, the German shepherd, circled them, fur bristling, barking into the wind as though daring the storm itself. "Stay close," Silas commanded. Valor leapt ahead, ears pricked, eyes cutting through snow like twin lanterns. The family set off, man, daughters, and dog, into a night that swallowed everything. The roads had vanished under white dunes. Silas leaned forward, muscles burning, his breath freezing in clouds. Each push of the pedals was a battle. The wooden bridge groaned under the weight of snow, and Ellie whimpered weakly, her fevered voice barely audible. Silas bent low. "Just a little longer, sweetheart." Valor surged ahead, clearing the path, barking sharply at every drift and shadow, as though marking safe passage. Near the church, a young man named Derek Holm, 21. Huddled beneath the stone arch. Derek was a college dropout, streaming on his phone to pass time while waiting for the storm to ease. His followers were few, his tone usually sarcastic, but when the dim beam of Silas's flashlight pierced the night, Derek froze. Through his screen, thousands soon saw a soldier hunched over a rattling bicycle, cart swaying behind him, a loyal dog plowing through the blizzard. Derek's voice dropped to a whisper. If anyone ever asked me what a hero looks like, this is it. He angled the camera and streamed the scene live. At last, the faint lights of the medical station glimmered through the veil of snow. Silas's legs screamed, but he pressed harder, collapsing against the handlebars as he reached the entrance. A nurse in her 30s, Maya Chen, petite with sharp, quick hands and eyes that rarely missed detail, rushed outside. She had grown up the daughter of Chinese immigrants in rural Minnesota, raised between two cultures, always working harder to prove her place. That night, she didn't see a symbol, only a child. She lifted Ellie from the cart and called for the doctor. Silas sank onto the bench, head bowed, soaked through. Valor curled at his feet, panting, eyes fixed on the door where Ellie had disappeared. Lila crawled onto her father's lap, whispering, "She'll be okay, Daddy." Silas wrapped his arms around her, too drained to speak. Hours passed. At dawn, Maya stepped out. Her voice was gentle. "She's stable now." Fever's broken relief buckled Silas's shoulders. He touched Valor's head, whispering, "We did it." The dog licked the salt of tears from his hand. Meanwhile, Derek's live stream had exploded. Within hours, the clip of the soldier bicycling through the blizzard with his daughters and dog had gathered millions of views. Headlines spread, "Silent Guardian in the Snow." To the world, Silas became a hero. To him, it was simply a night when he could not afford to lose. Nora Whitcomb, the young journalist who had once posted the porch photo, saw Derek's stream replayed endlessly. She wrote a new article, "Battles After the Guns Fall Silent." She described how Valor's barking led the way, how a father's desperation turned into resolve, and how war did not always end with treaties but continued in kitchens, in sickness, in storms. Her words struck deeper than she expected. Letters of gratitude poured in. When Silas returned home, Ellie safe in his arms, Valor paced every room before lying down beside her bed, curling protectively until she drifted into sleep. Silas sat at the table, listening to the storm fade outside. Fame was swelling beyond the wooden walls, but all he wanted was this, quiet. Two daughters breathing steadily, and a dog whose loyalty no storm could ever break. The days after the snowstorm settled into a fragile peace. Ellie recovered quickly under Maya Chen's careful watch, and Silas kept his girls close, still wary that fate might test him again. But peace has a way of drawing shadows back, and one morning as frost clung to the bare trees, the past returned to his doorstep. Marina Caldwell stood at the gate. She was 35, dressed not in luxury this time, but in a gray wool coat, her hair tied back plainly. The sharpness that once marked her beauty was softened by sleepless nights. Regret had carved hollows beneath her eyes. For weeks she had seen Silas's image in news and headlines, haunted by the sight of Valor guarding the children, haunted by the daughters who no longer called her name. Silas opened the door before she could knock twice. He stood tall, his face weathered, yet calm. Beside him, Valor positioned himself, not growling, not lunging, only tilting his head with an uncanny steadiness, as though reminding both of them that peace, not fury, must lead. Behind Silas, Ellie clutched Lila's hand, peeking cautiously. The girls did not run forward. They had forgotten the warmth of Marina's embrace. "I came to see them," Marina whispered. Her voice trembled between plea and apology. Silas gave no harsh words, no accusations. He stepped aside slightly but did not invite her in. "They don't remember you," he said evenly. "They call you the one who went far away." Marina flinched, tears filling her eyes. When the case reached the courthouse, it was not the tabloids that mattered, but the steady voice of a father who had endured. The small chamber smelled of varnish and old paper. The judge, Harriet Monroe, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and stern spectacles, presided with cool authority. She had built her career defending children in custody battles, scarred by losing her younger brother to neglect decades earlier. That memory gave her rulings a quiet severity. Marina sat with her lawyer, hands twisting nervously in her lap. Silas came alone, dressed plainly, valor lying at his feet like a sentinel carved from fur and bone. When asked for his statement, Silas's words were simple. I don't teach them to hate their mother, but I ask you not to reopen a wound in children who are still healing. His voice held neither anger nor blame, only the weariness of a man who had carried too many burdens. The girls sat in the back, Ellie holding Lila's hand, valor stretched across their shoes like a living barrier. The sight softened even Judge Monroe's practiced heart. Her gavel struck gently but decisively. Visitation was denied for now, until the children themselves sought it. The sound echoed like the final crack of ice on a winter river. Marina left the courthouse in silence. Snowflakes drifted down, fragile, vanishing on her coat. She walked through the streets like a ghost, knowing the law had not condemned her, but her children's silence had. That night, long after the girls had gone to sleep, Silas heard the faint squeak of the mailbox. He stepped to the porch but saw no one. In the box lay an unmarked envelope. Inside was a short note, the handwriting familiar. If my child allows, I will stand at the gate for as long as it takes. Silas folded it quietly and placed it inside the wooden chest where he kept his old insignia. Letters from fallen comrades and fragments of a war that never truly left him. It belonged there, another memory, another weight. In the kitchen the next morning, Lila sat at the table scribbling in a small notebook she had started keeping since the storm. Her handwriting was clumsy, letters uneven, but her thoughts were sharp. She wrote, "If someone wants to come back, they must learn how to knock before stepping in. Uturnanan Ashiranam." She didn't show the page to anyone, but Silas saw it when she closed the book too quickly. He said nothing. Some truths were better left in a child's guarded words. Valor lay between the two girls on the floor, his body warm against their legs. He stretched across the threshold like a living lock, not barring entry, but reminding all that entry must be earned. He was more than a guard dog. He was a hinge between past and future, between betrayal and forgiveness, between the silence of wounds and the possibility of healing. Silas sat quietly that evening, watching his daughters draw in the firelight, Valor's breath steady beside them. The world outside saw him as a hero, a silent guardian. But in that small kitchen, he was only a father, trying to build a home from ashes, and he knew, with every beat of the winter wind, that some doors, once closed, could only be opened from within. Winter deepened, but the Whitaker house no longer stood alone against the cold. One Saturday morning, the crunch of boots filled the yard as neighbors, old friends, and members of the North Star Veterans Alliance gathered. They carried ladders, beams, and bundles of shingles. The old gray roof leaking with every storm was stripped away. Hammers rang like church bells. The Alliance sent Frank Delgado, a 60-year-old retired sergeant of Mexican descent, stocky and broad-chested, his voice raspy from years of shouting orders. Frank had lost his son in Afghanistan, and since then he dedicated himself to repairing houses for other soldiers' families. As he nailed planks alongside Silas, he muttered, "We can't fix the war, brother, but we can fix this roof." His grief made him gruff, but his hands moved with compassion. Inside, the twins watched through frosted windows as the old floorboards were replaced with polished pine. The air smelled of sawdust and hope. Neighbors painted walls a pale white, replacing the tired gray. Valor trotted among them, tail high, inspecting every tool bag and nudging stray gloves back to their owners. Children from the block followed him like he was the captain of the repair crew, laughing as he delivered nails in his mouth or dragged a small wreath to the door. For the first time in years, the house hummed with life. When dusk fell, Silas stood on the porch, staring up at the new roof. Snowflakes landed and slid down without finding cracks to slip through. His daughters ran circles around Valor in the yard, their boots kicking up powder, their laughter rising into the crisp night. Silas whispered almost to himself, "We are standing again." Weeks later, an invitation arrived, an embossed card from the Veterans National Seminar, "War in What Remains." Silas hesitated. Public speaking was not in his nature. His voice belonged to the silence of sentry posts. But Ellie, curious, asked, "Daddy, will you tell them the stories you tell us?" She held his calloused hand, eyes wide, and he realized she was right. Some battles had to be spoken. At the seminar hall, 100 people gathered, veterans, young and old, scholars, families of the fallen. Silas walked to the podium without notes. His uniform was clean, but still bore its faded patches. His voice, though quiet, carried. "I won't talk about tactics," he began, "but about Bobby Finch, who laughed the loudest yet fell first. About nights guarding children's graves in foreign soil, and about the old house I returned to, no bullets, no bombs, but a daily war to keep my daughters warm." His words cut through the stillness, not polished but raw. Valor lay at the foot of the stage, a silent anchor. The hall rose in applause, not for a soldier's victories, but for a father's endurance. December brought the end-of-year ceremony at the twin school. The gymnasium glowed with yellow lights, paper snowflakes dangling from strings. Parents filled the rows of folding chairs. Ellie, her hair tied with a ribbon, stepped to the microphone. In a clear, unwavering voice, she read, "My daddy is not Santa Claus, but he knows how to fix toys, cars, and my heart when it breaks." The crowd stirred, some wiping their eyes. Lila joined her sister, and together they hung a small ornament on the Christmas tree. A shiny ball Valor had proudly carried in his mouth all the way from home, tail wagging like a drumbeat of joy. The room burst into applause. At home that night, the little house glowed golden. The new roof kept out the snow. The floor no longer creaked beneath small feet. Silas strung lights around the window frames. Ellie and Lila draped yarn ornaments, while Valor dragged over a basket of pine cones, insisting they too belonged on the tree. The air was filled with the smell of roasting bread, no longer burnt, and the crackle of a fire steady and warm. Somewhere on the outskirts of town, Marina boarded a bus out of Duluth. Before she left, she had slipped one last note into the mailbox. "I am sorry. I hope one day they forgive me." Silas read it quietly, folded it, and let the wind carry his words. "I forgive, but the children need time." Later that week, Nora Whitcomb returned with her camera. She didn't ask permission. She only lifted her lens at the right moment. Silas sitting in the doorway, darning a wool scarf, his daughters giggling beside him, Valor resting on the porch like a sentinel carved of fur and loyalty. It was an image not of sorrow but of healing. She titled it simply, "A House with an Open Door." That evening, Silas looked at his daughters asleep beneath quilts. Valor curled at their feet. Snow fell gently outside, but the home glowed from within. He whispered to himself, "If there is only one victory in a lifetime, this is it." And in the quiet, Valor's ears twitched, as if he too understood. And so, in the quiet glow of a house once broken but now alive with warmth, Silas and his daughters discovered that some victories are not written on battlefields but in kitchens, in classrooms, and in the steady eyes of a loyal dog who never leaves your side. This story reminds us that even when doors close, love and courage can build a new home worth opening again. If you were Silas, would you find it in your heart to forgive, or would the wound be too deep? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give the video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of hope, faith, and healing.